Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first session of Forward Academy. We are streaming this live on YouTube, um, and we are in a Discord stage channel just to manage the talking bits. Here in a few minutes, hopefully, we'll have a few more join us, but we'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first session of Forward Academy. I recommend if you're in the stage channel and watching the YouTube, go ahead and mute the YouTube. I just had it echo on me. Um, all right, so I want to talk a bit about the format for the evening. This is our first Forward Academy session, so we're still kind of ironing out what's optimal. This will not be it in the future, most likely. But for tonight, I'm going to go through the slideshow. There's about 6 slides in this slideshow. I'll talk through each of the bullet points, and then at the end of the slide, I'll give you guys an opportunity to chime in. I'll take between 1 and 3 folks. If you've never used a stage channel before in Discord, it's really easy. At the bottom of your Discord screen, there should be a hand. When you hover over it, it should say raise hand. Just click that. I'll bring you up on stage. You can say your piece. Please keep it to the topic of the slide, and then we'll keep rolling through. At the end of the slideshow, I'll stop the recording. I'll go off live, and we'll have a more informal Q&A and also just a roundtable discussion. I'd love to hear you guys' takes on our topic for tonight. So if you're down to hang out for that, the target time for this video and slideshow is about 30 minutes. I really want to get as close to that as possible. Under is great. So let's go ahead and kick it off and get started. Tonight's topic is about beating the dragon. I really wanted to focus on our first tenet as an organization. As Forward RPG, we're all about running non-D&D games, tabletop RPGs for the public. And it's really hard, to compete with D&D's share of the player base. And so tonight we're talking about how can you evaluate these games to see if there's something you'd be interested in running and presenting to folks, especially because a lot of times we run for strangers. So our first tenet is that we run games besides D&D. We don't have any hatred for Dungeons and Dragons. The problem that I personally have is that Wizards of the Coast and their game has a humongous share of the player base. And I don't think it's representative of the quality of that game versus other games. So our goal is really to amplify the marketing of other designers. Often they don't have the capital of the publicly traded company that owns Wizards of the Coast. And so it's harder for them to really get their games out there and get their games known. So that's a big part of why we established Forward RPG. And our goal is always to just run dope games. As long as we're doing that, I'm happy with us as an organization. Now, tonight I'm going to present you a method. For me, it's the perfect method right now, but I definitely recognize this is not the optimal way to search for and evaluate new games. The way I've come to what I'm presenting tonight is through a lot of trial and error. I've messed up a lot. I've definitely backed some stinkers on Kickstarter. I've definitely bought some games that I'm not going to say regret because they taught me something, but that I don't enjoy and I don't run. A lot of my games I've just read. Some I haven't even read, that they just lost their shine. And my one hope is that each person that watches this video or is joining us for this workshop will learn something, will take something from it. Even if it's that you don't agree with my methods at all. I think that's a valuable lesson in and of itself. So the core of my methodology when it comes to finding and evaluating new games is I look for red flags. I'm really looking for reasons to get out of the game, because if I don't find any, then that makes me all the more jazzed for the system or the product, whatever it is. Generally, I've found, especially with crowdfunding projects, if it looks too good to be true, probably is. I mean, that's true in most things in life. I also try to give myself a cooling off period. I try not to be convinced by these limited time sales, or if I see a sale that's running for the next week and I see it day one, I'm probably not going to buy anything day one. I'm gonna wait till to see if I still want to buy whatever it was I was interested in. 3, 4 days later, maybe at the end of the sale. Um, because they definitely try to get you to back the project or buy right then. And also, a lot of these crowdfunding sites will let you cancel the project, back out of backing it, right up until the deadline. So I definitely recommend taking advantage of that. Um, this is just kind of an intro, so I'm not going to take feedback here. We're going to jump right in. How do I evaluate games? Well, first off, you got to find the game, right? There's a lot of online platforms you could do that at, as well as brick and mortar stores. I always recommend supporting a friendly local game store if you can, especially if they give you the space to run the game, bring some friends together, have a public space to try out games before you take things to a private home. Um, but there's also a lot of good online websites that aren't Amazon. You don't have to feed Bezos every time you want a game. Second step we're going to talk about tonight is getting the games. A lot of these games have free quick starts that they distribute, um, which are definitely provide a lot of value. There are also rules excerpts on itch, and they'll just post screen grabs of the rules, just pages of the PDF, so that helps as well. And then there's playtests and community copies you can get, which are full PDFs of the game that'll let you in a bit more on if you want to back it or not. And the last step is reading the rules themselves, right? I recommend on a first evaluation just skimming it, unless you really want to read through the entire thing. But before you know if you like it, I recommend just looking through it as quickly as possible so you don't waste your time. Um, all right, let's get into the meat. Let's talk about finding the game. So, uh, to discover games, there's a lot of channels I'm plugged into. Also, if you have a link to the slide deck, which I'll post in the YouTube video description, and I've also shared in the thread we have going for this session tonight, there are a lot of resources there that I use, and I've got direct links for them in the speaker notes of the Google Slides. And if you have a hard time finding those links, I can absolutely send them to you or post them more publicly. Um, I'm subscribed to a lot of blogs. Substacks are really big these days. All a Substack is it's a blog that'll email you. Um, and there's blogs like Gladysant, which is Questing Beast, or Ben Milton is his name. He's one of the foremost OSR creators, and he's got a newsletter that comes out called Gladysant through Substack that basically summarizes everything that's been going on in the OSR, and he's really good about linking. It's not just articles about the OSR, and it's not just sales. It's also products, Kickstarters, pretty much every product that's been coming out in the OSR in the last, since the last Gladysant came out. There will be a new one. Play Fearless is another resource that I use. It's more on the story game side. The man named Mad J. Brown, who's really popular in the Gauntlet community. They release a lot of story games like Brindlewood Bay, Trophy RPG, which are generally lighter and more narrative focused than things like the OSR or more traditional games like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder. And there's also the Indie RPG newsletter. That's also more on the story game side. They post a lot more insightful stuff, more analyzing the hobby and the business in general, as well as analyzing new products that come out. I find their stuff pretty interesting. There's also a bunch of YouTube channels that I'm plugged into. Questing Beast is there. Again, that's Ben Milton. He made one of his videos went, I'm not going to say viral, but he was one of the first ones to make a video about the 5e DM shortage, and that caught flames. You might have seen that on Twitter or other places around the internet. There's also Plus One EXP. It's a man named Tony Vicinda. He does a lot of content about story games. He's more of a marketer, but he definitely has his finger on the pulse of new stuff coming out, both in the OSR scene and the story game scene. There's also Dave Thomavor. He covers more traditional stuff. He covers, your Call of Cthulhu's, your Pathfinders, he doesn't really do Dungeons and Dragons. He'll cover what Monty Cook's up to, whether that's Cypher or whatever he's doing these days. The third source I use to discover games is awards shows. I always try to check out as many award nominees as I can. And the biggest award shows for tabletop RPGs are the Ennies, which come from EN World, and they're always presented at Gen Con around the August-September time frame. And then there's the Tabletop Awards, which is uh, the publishing house Dicebreaker. They have a website that covers tabletop gaming news. They just launched this last year, so there's only been one Tabletop Awards so far, and they do that at PAX Unplugged, which is around the December timeframe. But they've got the list of all the nominees. You can even find historical any nominees, and they've got their own systems for finding judges. And I find them really good to really see what's hot in the last year, for lack of a better term. See what people are playing, see what people are really interested in and really voting for. Because I know the Ennies are publicly decided. Basically, anyone can vote for what wins in the Ennies. I'm not sure how the Tabletop Awards do awards and voting. Then the next step after you discover the game is you got to buy the game. Where can you do that? Especially with indie RPGs, they're a little more obscured. You can't go into, well, now you can go into Target and buy Avatar RPG stuff, but you couldn't always do that. And it's still limited to your really, really big games. Not every game had a $9 million Kickstarter like Avatar did. There's DriveThru RPG, which is the core PDF site. They're also great for doing print-on-demand games. They also do cards, which is great. A lot of games, a lot of RPGs that are hosted on DriveThru RPG have print-on-demand card decks. There's itch.io, which is the indie designer's heaven. If you have an idea for a game and you lay it out and do all the art yourself, you can post it up on itch very easily and get it out to people for, $2, $3, whatever you want to charge. And so there is a deluge of itch titles when it comes to RPGs. And there's also a lot of cross-pollination. I'm mentioning several platforms here, but a lot of games will be on itch, and they'll also be on DriveThru, and maybe they'll also be kickstarting. It really just, it depends on what that designer wants to do and where they want to sell their stuff. The last places on the bullet list are more in regards to traditional published stuff. You have your e-tailers, which are their discount websites, but they're specifically for tabletop games, right? There's ones that sell the more trad RPG stuff, so you'll find like Legend of the Five Rings there. You'll find the Star Wars RPG. You'll find Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, Dune. A lot of the like Modifius stuff will be on there. You'll find stuff you would find in a traditional local game store, more likely than not. You'll find at these. There's Miniature Market, Cool Stuff Inc., Game Nerds. There are others. I'm sure there's a lot I'm forgetting. But there's also the more indie darling zine marketers who they have a bunch of weird random games, but also some bangers. They've also got your Mouse Ritters and your what else is big on Exalted Funeral. They've got a lot of OSR darlings, a lot of Mothership adventures, things like that. The biggest ones I know of are Exalted Funeral, Radiant Conti, and Lost Space Studio. Does anyone have any input about finding games that they'd like to add here? I'd love to open up the floor if anyone wants to raise their hand. Going once. Going twice. All right. Let's talk about getting the game. So you've got the game, you bought it, or you've acquired a quick start or something like that, and you're opening it up. And what are you looking for? How can you tell if this is a game that you're gonna like, or is something that you're gonna be interested in? First thing I would recommend looking at is the setting. Is it a pitch that you're interested in? If you don't like magic and you hear about the world of Eberron, right? That should be enough to tell you whether it's a game for you. Eberron is a very high magic world. It's basically like industrial punk, but if the Industrial Revolution was run by magic. And so if you're not into a big magic guy, that's probably not your thing. After that, I recommend looking into the system, the core mechanics, as well as other mechanics you might be interested in. I know I like games that have a way to mechanically incentivize players helping each other. So I always look for that. I'm also really big into looking at the core resolution mechanic for a game. So that's just the standard way of how I like. If I want to do something in the game, how do I do it? What dice do I roll? What cards do I draw, etc. If it's just roll D100, roll under, that's usually a negative for me. But if it does something new and interesting, you've got my ears perked. You've definitely got my attention a lot more. And also the vibe, just like reading through. Oops, accidentally minimized that. Um, See if you like the writing tone. See if you like the language. See if you like how the book's laid out. See if you like if is there an index. If it's a PDF, is the table of contents hyperlinked? That's a really big just ease of use thing. Um, Next thing, what is this game giving me to evaluate it? What tools are they giving me to see if I'm interested in this game? What tools are available? Are they being kind of cagey about what they see as their IP? A lot of games these days have quick starts that they give away for free, which are short PDFs that aren't the full game, but they do have a lot of content within, um, which tell you about how the game works and tells you how to run even a more compact or a shorter version of their game. Normally they come with pre-gens. They don't worry you about character creation. They'll come up with a short how to GM it section and maybe a pre-written adventure. Um, that'll give you a much better idea of if that system's something for you. Uh, Also, like I said before, a lot of games on itch especially comes to mind will post pages of the rules where you don't have to buy. You can just go there and see if it's content you're interested in, if it's got art that looks cool to you. I know art's a big motivator for a lot of folks as to whether or not they want to buy a game. Also, a lot of games, especially indie games, need playtesters. And so if there's a game that catches your eye, or you see a pitch for a game on like Twitter or through a blog that's still in production, and a lot of them do need playtesters, there's usually a way for you to email them or shoot them a message and ask if you could help playtest the game. And for the price of your feedback, they will send you the game as it currently stands, and they'll usually include your name in the rulebook. So that's something that definitely helps the designers, and it helps you too. It gets you connected with a cool game. There's also a concept of community copies on sites like itch. If you're in need, if you are not in a financial situation to be able to buy the game at that time, a lot of designers will offer up free community copies, a certain limited amount. They can always come back later and add more if they want. And if you're in a position where that's something that um, would apply to you, I recommend taking advantage of that. They are there to be taken. And then the last step when you're getting the game before you decide to finally pull the trigger and back or buy it is what use case do you have for the game? Does it fill a hole in your collection? Is it that 3 to 6 player high fantasy game that you're missing ever since you chucked your D&D books in the trash? Is it something that fills a hole for something you want to run or play? Maybe there's a horror convention coming up and you're a little lacking of horror games, so you're looking for a horror RPG to add in there so you could run. Um, and the last thing is there something you've already got that kind of does the same stuff? Because at that point, you might want both in your collection if that's like your thing, but I definitely recommend, comparing them and seeing if it's really worth having both. Um, at this point, anyone want to jump in and add something regarding getting the game as you're actually reading through the? Xandra has something she'd like to add. Hello, Xandra. You're on stage. Sure. I would, yes. Uh, for me, it's a red flag as far as whether I'm going to buy the game. And it's usually not like a negative value judgment on the designer. It's just I need to know more about the product before I buy. And not too long ago, you'd be able to go to a game store and read through the whole book. We can't really do that anymore with these electronic games. So if you feel like you don't have enough information to justify the purchase, the games aren't going anywhere, especially if they're good. They'll be around on websites online later, after more YouTube shows run reviews of them, or maybe you have a friend that plays it and they can tell you what they thought of it. Oh yeah, absolutely. Because it's really up to them to sell their games, right? So you're not invading their privacy or anything like that by doing that. So you could definitely do that with the publisher or the designer themselves, especially for a lot of these smaller games. They don't usually have a publishing house they're behind. So you could just tag them on Twitter, or they usually have a contact form on their website. You can shoot that over and be like, hey, I'm considering your game, but I don't feel like I know enough about the rules. Can you maybe tell me some more, provide some more supporting stuff? They're usually happy to do that, and you're not the only one. Sure. All right. All right, Kent, I'm bringing you on. You're on stage. Welcome. That's an excellent point and an excellent idea. Yeah, actual plays are great to teach you about the game. Um, the biggest I recommend, if you're in the actual play market, if you're looking for actual plays to evaluate a game, look for ones that are edited, because the ones that are just they just hit record and they don't do any editing, I find them a lot tougher to listen to, and they're a lot harder to really glean mechanical information from. But they're a great asset for sure. All right. I don't know how to kick you off. There we go. Perfect. All right, let's move on. Reading the game is the last step. So, what do you like when it comes to games? That's the first thing that comes to my mind as I'm reading through these books. Like, what am I into? I mentioned before that core mechanics are my bread and butter. I'm looking for role playing games that do things in a new and interesting way. There's no such thing as a new idea, especially when it comes to things like setting. We've seen a million cyberpunk games, we've seen a million high fantasy games. And so I find a space where a designer can really innovate is through core mechanics and also supporting mechanics. So that's definitely where I look. Also, does the setting intrigue you? Does the art get your goat? Are you the kind of person that's super into having books full of dope art? Because there's definitely out there, Um, and also, like, are you looking for the one system, right? When it comes to universality, there's a lot of, I don't want to call them generic games, settingless games, games that you can run a high fantasy game, you can run a mystery game, you could run a western game, you could run a space opera game, all using the same system. Some people really like that. They don't want to learn a whole new set of rules. Is this the game that can do that for you? Um, and on the flip side of looking at what you like, also, what are your deal breakers? What makes you immediately nope out of when you're looking at an RPG? I know a lot of people really don't like proprietary dice. Proprietary dice being something like, there's a system. The current Star Wars RPG uses dice that you can only use for that game. Basically, you have a 12-sided die that has no numbers on it. It only has symbols, and the symbols are only good if you're playing the Star Wars RPG. Um, and a lot of people really get out at that point. Also, things like player count. I know for myself, there's a lot of solo RPGs out there. I hope there's a huge market for them. I hope people have a lot of fun with them. It is not my thing. any solo game or solo first game, I'm usually out of. I'm not into. And regarding those 2 points, how do I know if a game has stuff I like in it? How do I know if it's got my deal breakers in it? Um, well, well, more to that point, how do I know what I like in a game? How do I know what my deal breakers are? You know, really the only way is as you play more and encounter things that you're like, oh, that works great in this system. I think that's super cool. I hope there are more systems that do that. Or you'll experience something in a game, whether you're running or playing, that, oh, that felt really bad. I did not like how that mechanic worked at all, or how this works in the setting at all. I never want to play a game with that anymore. Both of those are very valuable discoveries. Um, and the second way to really know if you'll what you like and what are your deal breakers in games is to consume more RPG content. Really watch more APs, like Kent was saying. Actual plays, you can have kind of the same experience of, oh, I think when Critical Role had that moment where they used this mechanic that they introduced, I thought that sounded cool. Or you might be watching, Not Another D&D podcast, or listening to Not Another D&D podcast and hear them use something that you really don't like. Like maybe they use critical fumbles or some nonsense like that. And then you realize, okay, that's not what I like. Also, be malleable, right? What you like and what are your deal breakers today in RPGs might change. You might have more tomorrow, you might have less. Who knows? Um, does anyone have anything they'd like to add to this, our final slide? Going once, going twice. Okay. That covers beating the dragon. So we've gone through all 3 steps of how to evaluate games, where to find the game, how to get the game, and what you're looking for as you're skimming the game. And we've got one more contribution. Xandra, you should be coming on stage here in a second. There you are. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, that's definitely valuable. Sorry, did you have something else there? Yeah, absolutely. Conventions are a great place to try out new games. Anytime I go to a convention, I'm always looking for games I've never played listed on the schedule. I think it's a great way to try stuff out, especially try new stuff out before you decide to buy it. A lot of convention GMs love running what's new, and really, convention GMs love running what they love. And so you really get it's almost like a demo, where you get someone who's very enthusiastic about the system and is very amped to run it. Um, so it's generally an enjoyable experience, and there's also no obligation, right? At conventions, you can, if you're not having fun at a convention in a convention game, get up and leave. You really should. You're wasting your time. You're wasting theirs. You're draining the energy of the table potentially if you're really not having any fun at all. It's better for everyone if you make an excuse, say thank you, this just wasn't for me, stand up and go, um, and that way it improves everyone's convention experience. But I think that does it for our first Forward Academy session, talking about beating the dragon, discussing Forward RPG's first tenet. We run games besides D&D. I'd like to thank you all for joining me, and I will go ahead and stop the video.